Ooh, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 17 of Shot of Nostalgia, Saturday night's main event. Last time you seen me, it was still in the 90s. I mean, we've traversed a very long way here, but as always, I'm good old Mike Belcaster and my host with the most.
Live from No Cell Studios at the ACEFIELD Tavern, ACEFIELD Retro, and as Belcaster, it's so good to have you back. We're at episode 17 out of 18. We're here discussing all the great stuff. Shot of Nostalgia, we're at the tail end. We're at the nostalgia vanity project of it. We're past all the nostalgia stuff that was what we originally liked about it, but I watched this as a younger adult, and this is the type of stuff that we look back on not as fondly maybe as the PG era, but at the very end, I mean, at least brought you back. There were some bright spots for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. I mean, we were just talking about it off the air, but how controversial these 2000s episodes are compared to these 1980s episodes that we covered that were a little raunchy on their own aspect. But I mean, these do not hold up well, my friend.
No, they do not. And of course, there's a lot of stuff to build context throughout 2006, 2007, 2008, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes, especially as WWE is taking shape and changing who they are. And the identity of the company is certainly moving in a different direction. We covered the full landscape of it. I think we skipped over the Attitude Era throughout this, of course, jumping from 92 all the way to 2006. There's a lot that happened in between, but the company was so different. And even from now until then, looking at the company in 2008, when they first started to do the PG rebrand and all the stuff that went through it, the company in 2023, 2024, I think they had the idea of the heights they wanted to reach, Belcaster, but at this point, I mean, even they would be shocked if you would have sat in a boardroom with them and explained 2024, we're going to be highest grossing international type of TKO Endeavor stuff, like unbelievable stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If Vince felt a little desperate in these 2007 episodes to try to get things in a different direction. So looking back at it, I think the PG era has just been the best thing ever. So I think that was the best thing for WWE, honestly, even with all the resentment we took on as fans going into it, you know, so I'm pretty impressed.
Absolutely. And I think that we'll definitely talk about the PG era officially starting next week, obviously on Shot Nostalgia, because it becomes a very official thing in the newsletter. They discuss all of the happenings and why they went there. But today we're going to be discussing two events. We're starting our journey at Saturday night's main event, number 33, from July 15th, 2006, from the American Airlines Center in Dallas, Texas. Main evented by Edge and John Cena for the WWE Championship, followed up by the episode number 34, Saturday night's main event, on June 2nd, 2007, at the Air Canada Center in Toronto, Ontario. The night before One Night Stand 2007, headlined by Batista and Chris Benoit taking on Edge and MVP, and John Cena taking on the Great Khali. I would say stack card, but not really. These two episodes, and especially the ones we're going to review next week, and last week, the same thing. They feel like this forced commercial prior to a pay-per-view, almost like the video package they would air before the pay-per-view just to get you excited to get a casual audience in. It didn't feel like they put as much emphasis on this being a payoff. And why should they when pay-per-views happen and they're not going to give you a payoff for a big match on NBC? But at the very least, this feels like a hour-long infomercial for WWE.
100%, man. And I mean, sometimes that was the right way to do things, but it just felt a very misplaced in this generation of wrestling, especially with the era we're in, the talent we got going on. So I think they could have gone a different direction and made it still something viable to watch, because these seem like they could have been hit or miss. Obviously, they were on NBC, and it was before a pay-per-view, but it still was lacking a sense of importance.
So we're going to review all the tapings, newsletters, and context to bring you and update you on all the happenings inside WWE and their landscape. We have those two cards, as I mentioned, to study throughout the mid-2000s here, and we recently watched both of them, and it was a shot of nostalgia. It also was something else. We're going to get into the breakdown of it. Let's get to the happy hour and talk about what's going on in July of 2006.
Happy hour.
All right, here we are in July 2006, and Rob Van Dam, he's holding both the WWE and ECW titles after 5 years of mainly being in mid-card limbo. Woo. Both titles have been taken from him due to a change of plan stemming from him being pulled over and charged with possession of marijuana on 7/2 after a show in Huntington, West Virginia. After dropping both the titles, he was suspended 30 days, joining Kurt Angle as the two top ECW stars serving suspension time. And Meltzer continues, based on the downside guarantee, Van Dam's suspension is unpaid. costing him more than $20,800 minimum. He goes into details about it. We'll talk about play-by-play, but I remember this distinctly as a hardcore ECW fan when RVD was crowned WWE champion, following that awesome moment at One Night Stand, all the stuff that went into it. Man, this was a moment I remember forever, and I'll remember the news story dropping. It's weird to read this through the lens of being 30 plus years old now after, and how culture has changed. But do you remember where you were when RVD had to, drop these titles? It sucked.
I remember it hardcore. I was so happy that RVD won One Night Stand. I finally captured WWE Big Gold, and they did it in such a beautiful manner. You couldn't have been a happier fan if you were a fan of the ECW era. But I remember finding myself disappointed, not with Rob Van Dam, but disappointed with WWE based on the decision, because it's one of those things, like, you buy a goat, you know what the goat's gonna do. Don't expect it to fucking juggle. Like what were you expecting? What did you think was gonna happen, right? And of course he's traveling with Sabu. It was just a messy situation that could have easily been avoided, and it was just such a disappointing end to the RVD title run. I was beyond just the wind taken out of the sails for.
And these are one of those moments in time where everyone remembers kind of where they were when they read this story, because it felt like, as a fan base, we were winning when RVD won that title, and they were going to move on in the direction. Because with ECW One Night Stand, if you guys didn't live it and watch it and breathe it, when he beat John Cena after Edge speared him through the table and all that stuff that went into it, it's the famous sign: if John Cena wins, we riot. And that type of energy felt palpable at the Hammerstein Ballroom that night, and it felt like the company was moving in a different direction. And even Meltzer says, quote, Vince was starting to warm up to RVD and block out the anti-RVD contingency in the company. He continued, Sabu was about to receive the biggest push since the Taz program in ECW. So if you guys to refresh your memory on the details, of course, like we kind of glanced over them a little bit, but in the story that made national news, it was covered in many newspapers, and WWE was forced to address this because it was talked about on radio stations. As Belcaster mentioned, RVD was traveling with Sabu, pulled over for speeding at about 10:15 p.m. that night in Hanging Rock, Ohio, traveling from the house show that night, presumably to Columbus, where they were the next night. According to Ohio State Police, when troopers approached the car, rented in RVD's name, they smelled marijuana and performed a search. RVD was found in possession of 18 grams of marijuana, carrying 5 Vicodin pills. The pills were not in a canister, nor did he have a prescription for the drugs. The marijuana charge in Ohio is a minor, as possession of less than 100 grams of marijuana in Ohio usually results in just a fine and treated like a traffic ticket. So if he didn't have the Vicodin on him, it feels like they would have just kind of wrote him a ticket and moved on. But this also was bad time, man, because we were talking about this last week with the upping of, we're going to see it change in a big way in 2007, especially with the Benoit tragedy that goes down.
Yeah.
They're moving in a direction where it's anti-steroids, and they're being held feet to the fire. So they have to almost make an example out of him, where maybe if this happened in 2003, they would have been like, all right, well, you're still the champ. We'll figure it out from here. And maybe we'll just try to do a PR job and figure it out. But man, it was worst case scenario for both parties involved.
Yeah. I mean, coming from our time now, even, they made the whole Matt Riddle character based off of being a stoner, and you're sitting there like poor. Rob Van Dam was notorious. His moves were named after stoner mannerisms and stuff, and it was supposed to be tongue in cheek, but like such bad timing. And what the hell were they thinking was going to happen? Of course, he had some pot on him. He's RVD.
Yeah, and of course, like in 2023, especially people that are younger, we're going to look past this. And I remember having a conversation. This kind of brings context of how society changes their views, especially as the younger generation gets older. I remember having the conversation about someone thinking that culture is moving in the direction where eventually be able to buy weed from 7-Eleven. And we're not too far from that. I think society has accepted the medicinal value of having marijuana and all that, but this was a time and place where it wasn't quite there yet. Society has ruled it as a gateway drug or whatever it was. But the big thing that has to do with the wrestling side of things, and Meltzer talked about it great here, because there's certain guys that are going to have the company back behind them, no matter if they have any sort of issues in the back. Like you could reference Randy Orton, for example, getting chance after chance, but guys that maybe there was a preconceived notion about maybe their talent or lack thereof in the company or the general consensus's mind, they're only going to get one opportunity. And Meltzer says Van Dam was not a management favorite due to the belief he was vastly overrated as a worker and below par for a headliner when it came to doing promos. Despite being popular enough to headline, this was emphasized in the years past by Triple H when at one point a decision was made to put the title on him, keeping him underneath the so-called glass ceiling. Meltzer continues, in WWE, being a headliner is a funny psychological deal. Unless forced due to talent depth issues and injuries, the company has an old line wrestler philosophy regarding the ability to carry a company. Unless the fans make you a star, which is rare. He uses it, Guerrero and Rey Mysterio as an example. Or in the case of John Cena, Orton, or Dave Batista, management had handpicked for stardom due to their looks, whereas Orton was made entirely by a management push. So he continues to talk about this, where people get second chances if they're chosen as the guy. Randy Orton, again, being that guy that had his past transgressions, admittedly so, in his own conversations. You get one opportunity, especially when the fans are behind you and they're rallying. It's a moment in time where this almost reinforced the idea that he shouldn't have been the top guy. Yeah. And it sent him right back down the card. He never got another opportunity to be that guy. He would always kind of hover around and be popular, but imagine him and Sabu at the top of the company. It's bizarre as an ECW mark, self-proclaimed. It would have been amazing to see at this time.
I couldn't tell you if I was more excited about RVD or the fact that Sabu was finally getting some TV. Like, I was so stoked about this whole resurgence of ECW and all the talent. I mean, Balls Mahoney was on my TV every week. How could you be a sad ECW fan? But, I mean, fast forward all these years later, RVD gets, inducted in the Hall of He brings Vince McMahon his own rolling papers and he hands him a box of them, and it's kind of funny, right? Like, it's just a little bit hilarious to look back at.
So of course this changes and shakes things up about where they're going, because RVD was going to be the champion at least for the summer, and so the Saturday Night Main Event show has been changed, and there were at least at press time no plans to replicate the match by doing a show versus Edge versus Cena match. As things stand right now, Hogan's storyline in this program at Orton does include Hogan going over at SummerSlam. So that's also going on in context. You guys remember Randy Orton versus Hulk Hogan. But Meltzer says there's a lot of internal pressure regarding Saturday Night's Main Event. In the meetings with the McMahons recently, NBC expressed their concern that the company has yet to push the special harder on both Raw and the ECW shows. There's only 1 week to go, and they're coming off a first show in March, which was a gigantic rating disappointment thus far. DX versus the Spirit Squad in a 2-on-5 elimination match, and the rest of the card is being redone. There's expected to be either an ECW match. It goes about through the whole card, but at the end of the day, these NBC shows felt like an obligation, and they were mailing it in. Almost reminds me of the same energy, and of course, people behind it would deny it, but when Adam Sandler signed that big deal at Netflix, you had to produce a certain amount of movies on Netflix, and even if the creative energy is not there and you're not inspired to do it, you're obligated to do it. And when NBC is paying you a big fat check, maybe Saturday Night's Main Event is just like you mailed it in and you're just putting matches for the sake of matches without the same oomph, the importance that used to be on it.
Yeah, it's like let's write like 5 Rob Schneider movies and just throw them on Netflix.
Exactly. So, dude, it's one of those things where Saturday Night's Main Event was secondary, 100%, and I get that, but NBC is in a room with them like, hey guys, we're paying you a lot of money. We want these specials to feel important, and you're not even pushing them on your TV.
Yeah. Ugh.
So he finishes up this newsletter by saying it's been advertised for several days that the July 4th ECW main event would be Van Dam defending both titles against Edge. Obviously, with Van Dam being suspended, the plan for this match was for Van Dam to beat once again Edge clean. The idea was going to be, as ended up being presented for the show, that RVD in the short run was constantly defending the title against top contenders and was worn out by the schedule. But on the show, not only was Edge not there, but his name was never mentioned. Instead, they did a show-long build-up for Van Dam defending against Big Show, which, of course, they had to drop as well because Van Dam was suspended. So, these things happen. And we talk about the false advertising and talent no showing, but sometimes there's the issue of injuries and also suspensions. And maybe in a bygone era where drugs and paraphernalia and all that stuff was looked upon, who knows how many of the top guys back in 1986, 87, 88, 89 would be suspended or things that were pushed under the rug because it was just the Wild West. And unfortunately, RVD was made an example of in a time where WWE was being in the limelight in a bad way.
Yeah, such a shame. Such a shame.
Moving to the July 24th, 06 newsletter, and the return of Saturday Night's Main Event, the one we're going to be talking about tonight, was a ratings disaster. The second show on 7/15 has to be considered something like a ratings version of a nuclear bomb. So unfortunately, with the ratings disaster prior, and NBC is not happy about this, they go through the numbers and talk about the being down 18% in homes, 19% in viewers from the show 4 months earlier. Meltzer said the decline can be attributed to summer because 15% fewer viewers were watching in total on the night of the first special. It's also misleading because many people back then in March were watching the NCAA tournament. So this is an even worse number because there's not a lot of competition in the summer outside of baseball. Really, I mean, football's not running against you. It's baseball is really running there, and WWE should have an open platform on a Saturday to kind of do well, and they didn't. But he also says WWE's under a contract with NBC for at least 4 more specials between now and October of 2008. And the most minor rating of WWE had ever drawn was February 1st, 1991, and this blows that one out of the water. So he goes into the reasons why this is how it failed, why it failed. But what are your thoughts on why this doesn't resonate with the fan base in 2006 the same way it would have resonated back in the day?
Well, I mean, you're talking, you got 3 different brands to push to try to put across on television. You got a fan base that has dropped off multiple times and came back within the last, Saturday night main events that they've grown up to. So I think the audience also changed, and they just weren't there. The nostalgia wasn't a big deal yet. It wasn't as big as it is right now. So I think a lot of people going into these events either just were watching to watch because they were home on a Saturday night and they didn't have any plans, or they were out living life and doing their own thing. It's you can't you might not be able to beat baseball, and you sure as hell can't beat the weather. So you're up against some hard competition there. But it's I think a lot of lack of content, a lot of lack of importance, and the fact that you had so much to drive on one show. And also them just not putting the effort towards it too, I think, is a big deal. Right. So it's a shame. I mean, because these are kind of, what could have been. You know what I mean? Like, you're watching these, you're left a little empty compared to what we've been covering this whole time on Shot of Nostalgia. So I can totally see why they weren't considered as big deal. Absolutely.
So Meltzer references overexposure of the product, and you referenced before there's 3 brands, about 5 hours per week of first run programming and utilizing the stars across all these different platforms. Meltzer also said something very interesting that really wouldn't resonate with fans today, but it says it also clearly shows that it isn't obvious the general public has no interest in pro wrestling and surviving off its core audience. So, which they're also risking of burning out with overexposure. Me personally, I believe this is the residual effect of WCW going out of business. We're 5 years removed from that. Lack of competition breeds complacency, and I think that's what we're seeing here. WWE just mailed it in. They're the only game in town. There's no one really pressuring them, and as we see, it takes for AEW to kind of, light a fire on their ass to create the best programming we've seen in quite a long time. And I think that's part of this perfect package, creating almost a disaster era of wrestling where, we're watching WWE kind of decline financially and otherwise. This is definitely a down period as far as fans go, and a lot of people tuned out here. I mean, I know the Too Bad Chads talk about this. John Cena, this era right here, has made people a little bit disenchanted with pro wrestling at large. Yeah,
no, I remember distinctively being a fan during this time, and just Cena and Edge were the Hogan, Macho Man of the time. It was I think 12 pay-per-views. You could say 8 of them were Cena and Edge were the main event, and it sucks the way if they weren't the main event, they were either part of the main event. You know what I mean? So it's hard to have that repetitive programming, but I don't think it was WWE's fault necessarily. I think it was just a lack of setting up talent, and like you said, the downfall of WCW going out of business. I mean, this is long term. This is the first they're seeing oh no, we don't have anybody to push us anymore, and the ECW being a brand is not going to do it. Having SmackDown versus Raw as a brand is not going to do it. It can't be internal. It's got to be somebody out there. Sadly, TNA wasn't doing it at the time, even though they were putting on, I believe, a better programming at the time. It's a shame, man, because it would have been awesome if WWE gave a little bit of effort towards these. I think these would have been way more memorable than they came off to be.
So before we move on to the 6407, this isn't the newsletter. It's Brian Alvarez's Figure 4 Online newsletter that they only had available digitally. So we're going to talk about what he had said there to build context. My question for you is, obviously, with the rumor being that NBC is looking for 4 more specials in 2024, do you think, obviously, ratings have changed and the way people consume wrestling has changed? Do you foresee enough time has passed since Saturday Night's Main Event has been a vehicle that people enjoyed that has built up this almost desire or thirst to see something like this reappear on our screens?
Nowadays, yeah, I think we could get it Saturday. I think that's the thing. That 2007, there wasn't a allure for nostalgia like there is nowadays. I feel like everything's nostalgia clicked. Like our action figures, like outside of wrestling, even. I mean, most movie reboots are what old movies that we grew up watching. So we're like, oh, this is going to be exciting. I mean, we're getting a second Beetlejuice, next year. Like it's things that are nostalgic. That's that they're bringing back. So I think if you threw the opportunity of having a shot or as the Saturday Night's main event, next year, sign me up. I'm going to be not just because we did this, but I'm even more so now because we did this. Like I want to see how they go with it. And I think Triple H is the perfect guy to be planning something like that. I think he'll put the attention towards it. I mean, look at all the NXT events with underneath the WCW pay-per-view umbrellas, like Halloween Havoc and stuff like that. I was just thinking about that today, how awesome it is that like people like me and you who grew up with these things, we're able to live and see these things rebirthed. And even if it's on an NXT, it's so awesome to be like, damn, there's Halloween Havoc or there's an In Your House. So sign me up for Saturday night's main event, and I can't wait to see it.
No, very well said, man. I think we are in an era of this rebirth of nostalgia and people wanting to relive their childhood, whether it's comforting or it's just the market value of these things. And also, don't forget, the market of wrestling has changed in a big way where not only AEW is challenging them, but you're challenging for people's time. And I think there's a lot more time to go out there for and options to stream. It's not just based on what's on cable. Like at this point, we were talking about it before, as far as ratings to me are such an antiquated way of looking at popularity of wrestling. Those metrics are certainly outdated because you're competing against full libraries of TV shows, movies, and any streaming service that's being offered. Like if I want to, instead of watching Raw on a Monday night, if I want to watch, 16 episodes of Cheers, like I could do that. And that's something, I mean, maybe if you purchase the DVDs, which are starting to come in that direction, but as far as programming goes, that type of stuff didn't exist. And I think, like you said before, there's something about nostalgia creating rose-colored glasses, and people want to see this and remember the intro packages and see the red, white, and blue ropes and see sort of the refs wearing a baby blue shirt or just something like that will bring the older fan and bridge the gap and kind of scratch that nostalgia itch, which we know exists.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the machine that WWE's became, I think there's nobody else that could do it better right now. And I think it's great for fans, and I think it's just going to be good in general.
So hopping a year later to the 6407 newsletter, like I said, Figure 4 Online, written by Brian Alvarez, the conversation here has to do with UFC, and I thought it was appropriate, especially with the relationship with WWE and UFC being today. This is the first time that they're considered a big-time sport, but what I mean by that is Sports Illustrated came out with a story with them as the cover page. So Meltzer said, Brian Alvarez said, Sports Illustrated was coming out with a story about UFC. Even as a non-sports fan, I knew it was big. It ended up being way bigger than I ever imagined. It was the catalyst for the mainstream media a year too late to stand up and take notice finally. The amount of mainstream coverage for the week leading up to UFC 71, Chuck Liddell versus Quinton Jackson, was so far beyond anything I've ever seen. It was absurd. Said I work out in the gym every day at the same time, usually when Jim Rome and Tony Kornheiser shows are airing. I glanced up last Wednesday, the day after the SI piece appeared online. Liddell was on Rome's show talking about UFC versus boxing feud. They continue to talk about just the popularity of UFC and being accepted in mainstream culture. People forget, you and I lived through it. UFC used to be looked at it as this entertainment that was blacklisted. They couldn't run arenas. This was something that took time to get people to get behind. They only recently started to be able to run New York. Like I remember distinctly sports radio discussing, should they be able to have this here? Will the athletic commission allow them to run Barclays Center or MSG? And here we are now today where UFC is up there with the NFL and other big leagues as far as sporting goes and taken seriously as competition. And you want to talk about a boxing versus UFC feud. I mean, is there even a conversation at this point, which is more popular? Like they completely took that race and ran away with it. But your thoughts on this? I mean, at the time, Sports Illustrated was a very reputable brand as far as being on the cover. It almost took you to the next level.
No, 100%. I mean, this was the UFC kind of blooming into their own thing. And, with Brock Lesnar being there, all this stuff coming up. And I feel like it's just the tip of the iceberg for what UFC became. I mean, from 2007 on, it was one of the biggest sports everywhere. I mean, every dude that was at a gas station in shorts had a tap out shirt on, like it was the pro wrestling of, this was the attitude era for UFC. It blew up so big and took over sports. And of course, as it should have, it was, it was looked down upon for so long. I think it was just finally given its chance to shine a little bit more, and maybe a little too late. But also, I mean, we got action figures, you had spin-off shows, you had reality shows. I mean, UFC blew the fuck up.
So the other piece of the news here, and this was a quick anecdotal thing that I'd love to see, the 3 European guys signed by WWE last week were Drew Galloway, Sheamus O'Shaughnessy, and Hayden Vanson. 2 out of 3 of those guys are still on our TV. Sheamus right now is out with an injury, but we know what his career went on to be. Malvarez says they're all what you would expect, big dudes with good bodies, and they're looking to be pushed in the future. He was right about Drew Galloway and Sheamus O'Shaughnessy. I mean, those 2 guys, they would wind up having a banger match at last year's WrestleMania. They're 2/3 of an amazing match. Who would have thought seeing their names pop up here all the way in 2007?
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
So finishing it up here, and this is very interesting, especially with the way wrestling works today with these wrestlers showing up on independent shows. Alvarez says an entirely crazy story. John Cena did a guest refereeing gig on an indie show this past weekend. It was for Chaotic Wrestling in Byfield, Massachusetts, a promotion that employs his father, a super long-time wrestling fan, as a manager. The show took place seriously at Triton, which is Cena's last name in Marine Regional High School. So Cena took a bump due to a belt shot from Chaotic champ Brian Malone is in the main event. Brian Malone, by the way, is half owner of Rad Pro Wrestling, who I work with collaboratively. I thought this was amazing to see. And he should suddenly make a surprise appearance, but Vincent K. McMahon. So Vince did a run-in on an indie show. The bad guys double-team challenger Rick Fuller. Then Cena woke up, ran wild, gave Vince the FU. And DQ'd Malone says Vince ran for the hills. You can imagine the reaction this got. The show was a fundraiser for MADD, which is Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and the local police department. Everyone had the time of their lives. Cena's brother Dan is a policeman who was injured recently by a drunk driver. WWE.com ended up doing a story on it with photos. And Eugene also worked the show, taking on Handsome Johnny. But holy shit, man. We'll talk about Forbidden Door, things people don't talk about. But Vince McMahon and John Cena on an independent show with my boy Brian Malones. He is, main eventer, just in the main event. The last show I just had, I got to ask him about it because this was crazy when I read this.
Yeah, no, that's insane. Could you imagine being at the only independent show ever where you hear Vince McMahon's music hit and it's actually Vince McMahon going,
crazy, right?
Like, absolutely insane. Let alone John Cena being there, but Vince is just, I mean, that's crazy.
At a high school, man, Triton Regional High School, Vince McMahon and John Cena are in the main event sequence where Vince is taking a bump in an independent ring at Chaotic Wrestling. How crazy is that?
Probably the only reason why he let Cena go. He's like, well, I got to go too. If you're going, I got to take the bump.
I've never heard about this ever. Like, I know this is a resurgence of independent wrestling where everyone feels like they know everything going on in the independent scene, but as a lifelong wrestling fan, I felt like I've never known this. And if you guys are out there and you knew about this, like, if you're not, I mean, tell me you're not shocked. Even there's got to be pictures, videos, like what? It's just an insane sequence of events.
No, I'm pretty sure I've seen the video of this actually. Vince comes out doing his strut like his usual self, and it's hysterical though. Like I never in my I was like, man, that must have been the coolest independent show to ever be at. Because how else are you gonna lose your shit at an indie show like you always do? Because they're always so good. But I mean, damn, Vince and Cena showing up. That's your golden boys, man.
That's the newsletter. Let's get our fix. Let's talk about the Saturday night's main event, and let's go back to 06 from July 15th, 2006 in Dallas, Texas. Let's get our fix.
Get your fix.
All right, Saturday night's main event number 33 from July 15th, 2006. Like I said, the American Airlines Center in Dallas, Texas. Attendance being 17,343. We have Michael Cole, JBL, Jim Ross, and Jerry Lawler on commentary. And set the stage again here. These Saturday night's main events were mechanisms to do long-term commercials for future pay-per-view events. We want to get you to buy. So we have this commercial for the Great American Bash, ultimately SummerSlam later in the summer. As we discussed before, these shows don't mean as much as they used to, especially with the inundation of SmackDown and Raw, and now even we're going to get ECW down the line. This is all sort of stuff here. We have big stars, of course. For the presentation there feels like there's an emptiness to the way it comes on air. Like, I don't know if there's a way to like describe that to people. It doesn't feel like it's the same big fight feel, even though the stars are there. It's not like they didn't give us the stars. This didn't have Sunday Night Heat type of Gangrel versus Maven. Like, we got the stars. It just had this like hollow feeling. I don't know if you felt the same way upon opening.
100%. It felt like a velocity, you know, like there was nothing huge coming off of it. I wasn't feeling the Saturday Night's Main Event vibe, you know. It was even the 90s reboots that we got, those felt more Saturday Night's Main Event than these do. These just kind of feel like, oh, it's another show on the WWE brand. And I mean, that's what every show kind of felt like in this generation. So I kind of see why, but it also doesn't make up for it.
We open up the show, Hulk Hogan and Brooke Hogan coming out. Brooke says it's always been her dream to be here in front of the crowd with her father. Hulk says, thank goodness she looks like her mom, and talks about being on the first ever Saturday Night's Main Event, cueing into a lot of the nostalgia piece. And out comes Randy Orton. He has a rose in hand to interrupt. And he also says Hulk is the most important legend anywhere. He says Brooke is beautiful. He gave her the rose. And Randy explains, like, we may be feuding, we may be getting ready for a match at SummerSlam, but I am a Hulkamaniac. And, you know, at this point, I want to make sure that I can defeat you with respect at SummerSlam. And this was shortened to the point to build up this match. So I understand it's used as a commercial for SummerSlam. This is a pretty big moment to happen on our screens here. Randy Orton challenging Hogan. And a lot of people don't remember that match even happened. Like, it did at a SummerSlam.
Yeah, I thought it was a great match. I really enjoyed it, actually. It's one of my favorite early Randy Orton matches because, like, obviously he's not super, super young here, but he's also not he hasn't hit the Randy we know now, but he's still kind of coming into that shell. But I thought this was great, man. And it's cool to see the Brooke Hogan... Hogan knows best kind of vibe coming to the screen once again, even though it was so wild. But Randy's great, man. I thought the rose was a nice touch. I thought it was very villainousy, and I like Randy kind of giving the devious, like, oh, I just want to have a fair match with you, Hogan. Like, that's all I want to do. I want to beat you fair and square, no big deal. Because we know Randy's a fucking snake, and that's what makes it the best.
He is a viper, and they lean into that heavy in years to come. But we have our opening contest here. It's Batista, Rey Mysterio, and Bobby Lashley taking on Mark Henry, Finlay, and King Booker. Of course, Queen Sharmella and William Regal are in their corner, 6-man tag. They give this some time here, man. 10 minutes and 15 seconds. It kind of goes in there. They play the hits as far as what you remember. And two things I pulled away from this match. Bobby Lashley's a monster. He continues to be a monster, and he even looks better today than he did in 2006.
Yeah.
And I love that Finlay was wrestling on our screens. I mean, in this match, man, though, like, I don't know if you caught Mark Henry getting injured in this match and what resulted in this, but this would be his last TV match for about 10 months. He destroyed his knee. The patella was split in two. So obviously they were trying to, like, set this feud up with Batista and Mark Henry, his big push. But, man, they did what they could, but this could have been much, much worse, especially with Mark Henry getting hurt pretty early on.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a group with, I mean, a good group of people in there that could protect you. You at least hope so. So it's such a shame that Mark Henry blew his shit out. But, I'm with you. My favorite part about this was seeing Finlay. And Finlay's 2000s run was super underrated. I mean, that guy was a workhorse and well up there in his age. You know, he wasn't the fit Finlay we were watching on Monday Night Nitro. So it's crazy to see him still doing good. And it pops me every time. The shillelagh, just beating the piss out of people. Like, it's what you want out of Finlay, even with the goofy character. I absolutely adored it. But this was nothing spectacular. It was still fun, though.
So paint by numbers type of match you mentioned before with the teaming of Rey Mysterio and Batista and Bobby Lashley get the win. Of course, 619 to Booker, turns around into the Batista bomb. There it is. Like I said, this match was one of those things where if you can imagine what all these guys would be doing in the ring, it's exactly what you thought. A lot of great faces, though. And the other thing is the history with Rey Mysterio and Batista, an underrated tag team that they don't quite play into that storyline quite yet, but they have a great drama that unfolds on SmackDown for a bit with Batista and Rey Mysterio. And when Batista turns on Rey, one of the more memorable moments in Rey's career. Like, he always gets turned on by his friends, but for whatever reason, the Batista heel turn against Rey Mysterio really sticks in my head because they had this really like buddy cop mentality with the two of them in the ring.
100%. And this is they were my tag team in SmackDown versus Raw this year. I loved the Rey and Batista duo, man. I thought they did such a good job together. And yeah, man, it's such a shame that when Batista turned on him, it was brutal, heart-wrenching.
So we lead into our next match here. Carlito and Trish Stratus taking on Johnny Nitro and Melina in a mixed tag match. And this is very short, man. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I'll let you take the lead on it, but Not much here, especially in the other thing I'm looking at is all these competitors here. I always like to look at them where they're at in 2023. And of course, Carlito making his return to WWE, and Johnny Nitro is still doing great stuff over on the AW side at times. And then Trish Stratus made her return this year as well, looking better than ever. Melina not, and I've seen her at some autograph signings. She's not active right now, but
looks great.
Your thoughts on the,
yeah, still
your thoughts
healthy.
on these matches? This match right here with, I mean, it's quick, but
it was quick. I mean, I didn't really do too much out of context, right? I mean, if we were in the year 2007, I think it would have been a much bigger deal. But it was just, I wasn't a huge fan of it. Their mixed tag matches weren't the best at this time, as you know, they weren't as work rate as they can be and possibly should be. But I mean, this was quick and it was just a fun little spot. I didn't care much for it, but I also didn't care not to see it.
So being that we're in Dallas, of course, the Von Erich being the most famous family from the Dallas area, Kevin Von Erich made a quick appearance. This is appropriate because of this week. We saw the Von Erichs on our screen at Winter is Coming AEW Dynamite, so very cool to see them there. And then we have Vince McMahon in the back giving the Spirit Squad a pep talk. DX takes over the audio, turning it to Vince, give them spanking instructions. And I joke you not, this is what's going on here. This is, to me, man, the watered-down version of DX in the mid-2000s is the absolute dog shit worst. I'm not even a fan of it. I love Shawn. I love Triple H. But this, you would think over time this would be like, you remembered it, that it was worse than it was. No, it's actually, I remember in a more favorable light. Watching this back made me even hate it more. It's horrible.
Yeah. No,
DX
the Vince
in 2006 is horrible.
The Vince loves cock era of DX was not their most. It was way too hokey, way too kiddish, and just goofy, dumb humor. You know, there's nothing fantastic about it at all.
Gotta say, I dig the Spirit Squad though.
I loved
there was
the
something
Spirit
cool
Squad.
about them.
Yeah, I always did dig the Spirit Squad. It's funny, you know. We got Dolph Ziggler in there, baby Dolph Ziggler. But it was always. They were so good at being heels that, you absorbed it to hate them. That's what was your goal. Every time I would have bought a ticket to yell at the Spirit Squad. Like, they did a great damn job.
100%. And also give love to Mike Mondo, who is the head trainer, one of the head trainers at NYWC. So this was his time on the main roster, and he's so polished, man. Like, and they took this gimmick, and I'm sure when you see this on paper, it probably makes your stomach sink, but when you own this, we talk about this all the time. When you own the gimmick, like similar to the Red Rooster being just like, it sucks to see on paper, but if you put your all into it, it becomes memorable.
Yeah,
and there's something about the Spirit Squad where it felt like Kenny, Mitch, Nikki, Johnny, Mikey, they were all bought into this gimmick where they were very hateable and they played their role perfectly. And seeing them come out with this pack mentality, like, yes, they were cheerleaders, yes, they were goofy, but they had an edge to them, and at the end of the day, they could be taken seriously. Former tag team champions, like, they got a lot of screen time in the best way possible, where they're on screen wrestling Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Let's not forget that. So they gave them some edge here.
And they did it believably. Like, I loved when they would all grab somebody's limb and throw them up in the air and slam them on the ground. Like, there was so much goodness to it, so much richness to the characters that it's such a good job. Kudos to the Spirit Squad, man. You didn't get your flowers back in the day, but we'll throw them at you with some pom-poms too.
So before the match, when we have a DX and the Spirit Squad, we see highlights of the Diva Bull Riding first round matchup between Victoria and Michelle. They made the finals of this tournament or whatever they're doing, and only thing I can note from this is how far women's wrestling has come in the landscape of pro wrestling, where this was what they were on screen for. And there is Victoria and Michelle McCool Diva Bull Riding in scantily clad clothing. So
yeah,
what else?
Miss Callaway's came a long way. All right.
So we head to the match. DX, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels, of course, taking on the Spirit Squad. Kenny, Mitch, Nikki, Johnny, and Mikey in a handicap elimination match. So this is a non-title elimination tag match and a cell on either side of the ring for eliminated members. So Shawn says the following of the 5 male cheerleaders is brought to you by DX. This beating down is going to be brought to you by them officially. And if you're not down with that, and he can't say suck it because he's Shawn Michaels, he's the reformed version of him. And this match, I mean, at this point, like, it's an elimination match. There's a lot of guys in this. So for DX to win this match, which they do, eliminate all 5 guys in this, it's tough to fit all of it in one time. It feels like a sprint. And I guess you could say this about any of the matches that they've had in this build-up, because they've wrestled a few times.
Yeah.
I guess, what are you expecting? Because at the end of the day, Triple H and Shawn Michaels were going to go over. It's, the pair of the best all time versus the pack mentality of the heel goons. And it's almost a miracle at this point that they didn't lose in less than that, because it just feels like DX was able to just beat them up and have no issue with them. That's my only issue with it. I wish, especially on a platform like this, why not have the Spirit Squad get one over and just like pick them apart, use a weapon, do something where you get the win? Because that you're not going to do it on pay-per-view. You don't want DX to lose on a big platform, but something like this, it's a perfect opportunity to put some emphasis on them, put some heat on them, and they didn't take that at all.
No, absolutely. And it would have like done way better if, they were able to eliminate like Shawn, right? And then Triple H has to fight off, and they corner him up, or like Road Dogg was there. Like you got to remember, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn were both in TNA at the time, so we didn't get a full form DX, and it was just missing so much, and I think that hurt the actual DX storyline more. But like you said, this could have been a copy paste. Throw your jobbers in there against Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Just watch them hit finisher after. It was like a video game. You had the cheat code for unlimited finishers, and you're just trying to get shit done and have fun.
So the eliminations go as follows: Shawn super kicks Mitch for the first elimination. Triple H hits a spine buster on Johnny for a second one. Shawn chases Kenny up to the stage. Vince gets in a chair shot to at least build some drama here on Shawn Michaels. They get back to the ring. Shawn suplexes his way out of a sleeper. And then Triple H cleans house. I mean, a spinebuster, a double clothesline, pedigree on Nikki, and now it's 2-on-2. We got a super kick to Mikey, top rope elbow, followed by Sweet Chin Music into the pedigree to complete the shutout. No eliminations, despite the interference. And this was just them getting some aerobic endurance training in. They just literally, like you said, perfectly said, I think, had stored finishers in SmackDown versus Raw, and they just hit them, and that was it. And I just wish there was a little bit more to it. I mean, looking at it through the lens of a fan, a young kid watching this, probably enjoy the shit out of this because you just love to see DX get them here. But I don't know. There's more story to be told with these very overachieving cheerleader characters that could have been taken a lot more seriously if you give them a little bit of an edge. But because they're great workers too. That's the other thing about it. They all brought something different to the table with that great leg drop and the finisher, like you said, throwing them in the air. They're pesky, like a group of raptors, you know what I mean? Like the pack mentality, like they're more dangerous. And this almost was like right on an entree for you to tell the story that DX was unable to overcome, especially with Vince in their corner. And I don't know, they took the easy route out.
100%.
So after the match, Vince tries to unlock the cage, then Shawn super kicks him inside with the rest of the squad. And that's the end of that little segment here. And then they move into a video on Sabu. And then we get Great Khali and Daivari chatting, and Davari's talking about how awesome Great Khali is, and out come Big Show and Paul Heyman interrupt, and he lists off the size and the resume and says that, we'll see one day that who the real giant is, teasing this Big Show versus Great Khali match like anyone really wanted to see this. So then also they bring up the Punjabi prison match, and here's Undertaker interrupted, and they're building up to this Punjabi prison. They eventually came out with the figure form of it.
Yeah.
But your thoughts on Punjabi, the prison match, the cage match with the wooden spike post and all that? Great Khali and Undertaker, like, what are your thoughts on this feud? Like, we're not going to see the payoff here, of course, but what are your anecdotal feedback on this feud we see?
It was a cool ass toy play set, I'll tell you. For wrestling, I didn't vibe with it, man. It didn't work for me. As our good friend Randy Jackson say, that's a no for me, dog. Like, I was not digging it, man. Undertaker making gold out of goose shit as he always does. Khali was another fucking story, man. That dude was unbearable to watch in any match, let alone a match where he had to climb things. Jesus Christ. So I'm good on all that. Absolutely. I don't want to see it rehashed. I don't want to see, not even on a crown jewel. Like, save that shit. Like, go somewhere else with it.
Yeah, he couldn't move even at this time too. And this was, Taker tried his best, and even in this segment, he goes after Khali, and they kind of get into it, and he clotheslines him to the floor, and then he goes after Big Show, and Khali gets back in, and then they get a double choke slam on the Undertaker, leave him lying. And after, Big Show says Undertaker can come face him in ECW if he has the guts. So this was three big guys in the ring, and maybe they thought this dream match of Big Show versus Great Khali had some legs on it. And watching it now, maybe, I don't know. I was watching then. There's no, especially with the Big Show, like, they took all, and people forget. Debuted 99, and he they jumped the shark on him. They overexposed him, and it got even worse as time went on, turning him face, turning him heel, and over again. Took away the attraction factor of the Big Show. They try to bring it back in ECW as this like big monster there, and he definitely had moments. That match with Ric Flair where they're bloodied up and all that great stuff, but for the most part, it didn't have the appeal they thought it did, nor did Great Khali. And this goes back to the conversation we had a while ago, and I forget who was on the debate talking about Giant Gonzalez's appeal. That's a bygone era of wrestling where this, overexposure of these giants, I don't think it has the same effect in modern day wrestling. You have to, if you're going to be a giant, you have to be like Satnam Singh and be able to be athletic at the same time.
100%, or Braun Strowman of sorts. I mean, right. You have to be the whole package and be able to deliver accordingly. Because if you're just a big stiff dude that can't bump, that can't run the ropes, like what are you doing out there? Like you have no, you're not making any money for nobody.
And then they're running back the play. I mean, of course, Great Khali was popular internationally and all that, but they're running the Andre playbook years too late. And being limited in the ring, there are athletes that can be that big. We see, like you said, Braun Strowman. You can also reference, Satnam Singh. He hasn't drawn big money elsewhere, but like if you give him the W machine behind him, like he can work for sure. And I think he's naturally athletic. He's able to go in there and do some damage. And like a guy like Great Khali looks like at any moment the dude's knees are going to give out. Even back then, where he was being pushed as a world champion caliber wrestler.
Yeah, no, those were some hard watching matches. Like you didn't know what was going to happen, and it was always messy. I was always afraid for him to bump because like he looked like a guy on stilts. That's just how it was. And you thought, have you ever seen a guy on stilts fall? That's how like every Khali bump looks, and you're like, oh shit, man, like it just didn't sit right with you while you were watching. So I'm good.
So we go into our next match here: Sabu taking on Stevie Richards in an Extreme Rules match, and I was getting excited to get sit on the couch, grab a snack, and watch this match. But man, they go 2 minutes with this match, and Sabu absolutely wastes him. And this is a precursor to what we were talking about, that he was on the precipice of this big push prior to being, pulled over and arrested, and all the stuff that went into being suspended alongside RVD. Because Sabu wastes no time. He destroys Richards. He sets up the triple jump moonsault, and we see a little bit of the Stevie stuff get involved here, but just avoiding. And we see a flying something, whatever that move was, with a chair, and drives Richard through an already broken table for the pin. And really, this was a Sabu showcase. Like if you want to know what he's about in 2 minutes, here it is. And they try their best, and they try to shoehorn ECW type of feel on these cards, and like you can kind of really feel that ECW feels semi-important, like WWE, ECW. And I know there's been like a resurgence of popularity where people like go back and watch it. Punk was featured there, and there's some great stuff on it. But there's like, it feels really forced because it doesn't fit in the rest of this card. It doesn't flow. It's like we interrupt your regular scheduled programming for your random weapons match for 2 minutes. It just, I don't know, just didn't have the same spirit, obviously, as the original ECW. Even though probably at the time I was eating this up, because any sort of ECW resurgence on my screen, I'm all about it.
Yeah, I was just happy to see Sabu making money on national TV. Like I was beyond stoked. It was like, oh, Stevie's been there, so then like that doesn't hit as much. But like seeing Sabu on NBC, like that was fucking huge for me. And like you can't take that away from us, ECW fans. Like they pushed them. Like we got to see it. We witnessed it with our damn eyes, man. And I'll always cherish that. But they did not give it a proper treatment. That could have been a good 10-minute match and just been fun and entertaining, because we know Stevie can go, we know Sabu can go. They could have made it less of a Daredevil show and more of an actual ECW match. I think that would have been more better, but it was good. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Sabu will always have NBC on this one given night. So Nick Perry, we love you, brother. But we get to Brooke Hogan's About Us music video. So I guess that's the reason Brooke's on our screen here, her song About Us. And then they segue into this Randy Orton segment where Randy's talking to Brooke in the parking lot. Hulk is like, okay, yeah, you may have respect for me, but stop hitting on my daughter. And the Hogan's like, Hogan kind of ushers her away. And you see the camera pull back, and you can kind of see Randy Orton size them up. He RKOs him right on top of the trunk of a car, and Hulk is lying. Brooke is screaming. And I remember this distinctly, and this was a cool way to set up, like, although there's a mutual respect going into the match, there's some heat on this now where Randy Orton is like, I'll do whatever it takes to win, and I still want to date your daughter. So Hogan sold it like a champ. He's out there, like only Hogan can, bring back that emo side, just distraught and disoriented. Randy Orton's a legend, dude. Like the dude is just like,
great.
What a finisher too. Can hit it literally anywhere on anything, and it's like the birth of the RKO is just amazing. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. At the time, I was like, I remember when it happened. Like he took the diamond cutter. I'm like, I don't know if this will ever top the diamond cutter. I think it's surpassed the diamond cutter at this point. Like,
it has
really
to,
do.
yeah. No, and then the special ways it's been hit over the years. I mean, with the from moonsaults to you name it. I mean, Seth Rollins doing the stomp and Orton flinging him up and hitting it.
Even McDonough at Survivor Series flying off the cage, just like being thrown straight head first into the RKO. Amazing.
Beautifully done, and like it's awesome, man. I loved the Legend Killer gimmick. I loved this whole run here where he was just taking on legend after legend after legend. It really had a good vibe to it, man. And it was cool that Randy was kind of getting that space to become the Legend Killer. It was one of my favorite, very well done pieces of this era of WWE.
And I'm sure Randy's surgically repaired back would disagree, but I think the finisher is so important to what he became. It's almost the same relationship that Stone Cold is with the efficiency and the effectiveness of the Stone Cold Stunner. Like they go hand in hand. And I'm not saying that Randy Orton wouldn't have been as popular without it. And same thing with Stone Cold. I just think you need something like that. And it's funny that one's the Rattlesnake, one's the Viper, and their finishers are just hit out of nowhere and out of any sequence, standing up, sitting down, just finding a way to hit it. And I don't know, there's something great about it, an impact finisher. And, as great as Bret Hart was, like, no impact finisher leaves like the finish of the match would almost be, unless it's a roll up or something, it's not as surprising because like you can kind of see it coming within a couple seconds. Like, oh, he's lining up the sharpshooter. The RKO, boom, hits it in a second. Stunner hits it in a second, and it changes the dynamic of the match.
100%. Not done any more beautiful than Randy Orton or Stone Cold Steve Austin, man.
There's things, Viper and a Rattlesnake walk into a bar. Who's buying?
Exactly.
So we have Michelle McCool winning the Diva Bull Riding contest, and this is similar to the Diva Certs. It's really just
thank God
a way to get them on the screen wearing stuff and being good looking and beautiful and stuff. And that was women's wrestling at the time in WWE. Like it was. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's how they're presented, and that's what was on our screen. Michelle McCool, Mrs. Undertaker. So there she was winning a Diva Bull Riding contest. And wonder if she still has that award on her mantle. I'm not sure.
You never know. You never say never. It's pro wrestling.
So we have video of John Cena losing the WWE Championship to RVD, who lost it to Edge, setting up tonight's championship match, which isn't a triple threat, obviously, because Van Dam got suspended. We covered that during RVD screwed RVD. So, and who knows? I mean, he has a weed strain now, so like it just added to the brand. It just padded his pocket. Over RVD won, brother. Come on.
Listen, I got a box of autographed rolling papers from RVD. You have to. When in Rome, right?
He was ahead of the time, man. Battle Creek.
Exactly.
All right, covers for this main event. We have John Cena taking on Edge for the WWE Championship. Of course, Edge coming in as the champion. Ed there to pick up the scraps, obviously, from the RVD suspension mess. He's now holding that big spinny belt. And we didn't even talk about the belt itself because we don't even think we got a chance to talk about the John Cena spinner belt that lasts a ridiculous amount of time after John Cena is no longer champion. And even Punk holds it. It seems bizarre it lasts this long. I don't understand.
It's spinner tires, or what were they, rims, right? Spinner rims are way, like, it went out of style so fast, yet they were like, we spent way too much money on designing that fucker. Like, we're getting our mileage out of it. But this is, I mean, I've watched John Cena Edge wrestle so many times that it's just, it is literally a play-by-play. Like, this is paint by numbers wrestling at its finest, and especially in a match as short as 8 minutes and 17 seconds. I mean, Cena, you got Lita there to be the distraction, and her and Edge, I think, is one of the best underrated heel pairings ever of a manager and the wrestler. So it was great, but Lita gets the DQ on this. Screws up the whole thing. Cena's like, yeah, I won the match, but at what cost? Like it's goofy, but it's just, I don't know. Like I said, I'm still so worn down by seeing Cena and Edge wrestle. Like I could watch the match with my eyes closed, call the spots just by hearing the mat. Like it's ridiculous because it was that whole year was just this match over. But it was not discounting that it wasn't good. It just wasn't anything spectacular, and that's all I got to say about that.
And I'm not saying the addition of RVD would have saved this night of wrestling, but it would add a different dynamic. Because you mentioned John Cena versus Edge was a tired routine at this point, and it just felt like they were spamming it over and over again. And the DQ finish certainly didn't help, where Lita slapped the ref, and that's the DQ. It just nothing. And really, if you take in consideration there is a commercial, obviously we don't have to deal with it on Peacock, but they put a commercial in the middle of this match. It's about 5 minutes of action, and it feels like they weren't given enough time to have any sort of memorable encounter, and it almost feels it's like an appetizer for the table, like they're setting the stage for something bigger, and that was never the case with Saturday Night's Main Event. And I understand the mentality is selling a pay-per-view, and they want people to. And the way the company's revenue stream was structured is the pay-per-views were still so important, so you're definitely not giving away a clean finish where John Cena is going to win the title over Edge on Saturday Night's Main Event on an NBC special, especially when you already got your bag from NBC. Like you want to make sure that you're waiting for people to want to see Edge be beat on pay-per-view. I understand that, but they're going to go to SummerSlam and have their match. And, for now, this is just more of that kind of leave you wanting more. But for me, even like with the DQ finish, it always feels hollow, especially with how, weak the DQ was. Like the ref getting slapped by Lita. That's what you got here. And it wasn't like this great memorable match. Just it goes out with a whimper, and it feels very unenthusiastic and uncreative and just but Cena celebrates, and I mean he understands, makes it clear he's not the champion, which I did appreciate from Cena, where you didn't get the 1993 Lex Luger with the confetti coming down the DQ. He knows he didn't win the title, and he hits a pretty awesome FU off the steps through the announcer's table, so at least the fans have that to kind of go home with. That's the lasting image. But pretty uneventful night. I mean, really, if you go through pound for pound, this, unless you're watching this for just to tune in, nothing happened that was you need to see.
Nothing.
Like that is the biggest piece of commentary you can pull away from it.
Sabu and Steven Richards tore the house down for 2 minutes.
The only thing it really set up was
that place.
This winds up having Undertaker making his only appearance on ECW. Sets it up from here. That's the only thing that comes out of this.
And it was a shitty call out too. Like it could have been done way better.
So if you're into bull riding contests with the Divas and you're into DQ minute finishes and short matches, this is the card for you. But all joking aside, like we'll get into when we get to the Chaser and all that. At the very least, it makes you aware of the roster. Like you can kind of see the depth of talent here and kind of build the context of floating back in and out and seeing where this was. Definitely a transitional year for them. They're moving from the Ruthless Aggression into what was the PG era in between. They're on the in between, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You see some of the edginess of the product, but there's definitely leaning more family friendly.
100%. And also you got to remember we're pre-network. We're pre all the big stuff. So this is a weird time for them where they're trying to revenue. They're trying to still sell pay-per-views, which is just, I mean, there was probably like 20 a year at this point on WWE because they had so many brand splits and stuff. I think I was, as a fan during this time, I was burnt out just by the sheer amount of 2 pay-per-views a month, now 3 including ECW, if they had one. It was just like overkill, and that's the thing. So these shows felt lackluster because of that as well for me. I still feel the burnout coming back to this generation, this era, and I'm like, oh god.
Well, we move a year in advance here. June 2nd, 2007, Saturday Night's Main Event number 34, Air Canada Center, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Attendance being 16,176. And we have Michael Cole, Jerry Lawler opening up here for Saturday Night's Main Event number 34. It's the night before One Night Stand 2007. So they kept the model of the pay-per-view, just didn't have the same ECW feel. They just made it a WWE vehicle and they just kind of went along with it. And this is a show, I mean, at this point, you can tell they have bare minimum of interest. This was their last of the obligation of this set of 4 that they're just like, there was no mention of this on the lead up, according to reports on WWTV. And this is really just a bad sign of things to come as far as like us enduring this product. And show's only an hour and a half. And, and the theme of this show is biggest, smallest, strongest, strangest. So that's what they make sure they make it clear. And man, they didn't disappoint. This was a in my opinion, one of the roughest matches we're going to see as far as entertainment value. I had a hard time with this one, Belcast.
No, me too. This was tougher than cough medicine in the third grade, man. It tasted bitter, and I was not having it, man.
So we get John Cena versus Great Khali next, and I mean, this is a non-title preview of tomorrow's title match, and we get a video on Khali being big and scary, and we go, Cena's going right for him. He's not going to back down from the monster, and Khali punches him in the corner without much effort, and he attempts the STFU, and he's shrugged off. Khali runs him over to clothesline, and the fans are just booing Khali, so you can't take that away. He does get heat, and he's pounding on John Cena. He goes to the FU one more time, and elbows away to freedom, and then the chokeslam hits on Cena, and that's it, dude. He puts his foot on Cena's chest for the pin. Like, what? Like, I couldn't believe that that was it. Like, were you shocked seeing the end of this match?
Yeah, shocked to say the least. This was a tough watch. Like, I don't know, man. We got so much build up from Cena. Always Superman. Like, he can never be defeated, and he goes down with the choke slam, and it's just goofy. It all comes off goofy, man. But I'm not here for this Khali thing. I'm not like, it was never sat well with me. So the second he would come, even as a kid, I mean, I'm sure I'm well past my kid years here, but I'm watching this and I'm like, shut this shit off. Like, I ain't got time for this.
The thing is too, and I understand like the mentality is, if you're a young fan watching this, you want to buy the pay-per-view the next night to see if John Cena can recover and beat him and overcome the odds. But it's almost like the Jon Moxley CM Punk feud where he gets squashed and then you like build up to this big feud except Great Khali doesn't have a Steel slapping him in the face for 11. You get the rematch. It's an open challenge. It's Great Khali squashing him. And this match is a trilogy to build the context around it, and Cena must overcome incredible odds, and they're trying to really build the adversity because he's super Cena at this time. The fact that Khali just goes in there and owns him, it's supposed to, like, I don't know, make Khali feel important. But as we discussed before, Khali leaves a lot to be desired in the ring. The fact that he's coming as this big bad, being the guy, it just stuff doesn't hit right, man. It doesn't.
No, I just it's this ain't it, man.
So we get Great Khali, and he's ranting, and they translate it on the bottom and saying that he could just beat John Cena anywhere, anytime, and they're setting the stage for what's inevitably going to be their rematch the night after. And like I said, the fact that Great Khali is a former champion while Andre the Giant never officially had a reign. I know he had that short, he's given the title, all that stuff, but man, yeah, it sucks. Like, I don't know what else to say about it.
Just I got a shit taste in my mouth from it, man, and I still ain't happy with it.
So we move into Bobby Lashley versus Mark Henry, and it would have been a great match, but it's not a match. It's an arm wrestling contest. Lead us through this. I mean, we get Vince McMahon out there, which provides some comic relief, but
so Vince is full blown in his homeboy era here. It's the best way I could explain it. He's rocking the do rag. He's champion Vince, but he challenges Bobby Lashley to an arm wrestling match, and they set it up. He's coming out, and everybody makes their entrances. And Vince is like, hold on, I got a surprise. And the world's strongest man, damn it. And Mark Henry comes out to save the day. And we get a very lackluster ending to this. I mean, Lashley drops Henry. Lashley takes out Mark Henry. It's a goofy thing, man. A weird segment. Vince is just on some other planet right now. Like, this is a whole wild ass era of WWE, man.
I don't understand the arm wrestling match. They've done it a few times. I know they did Scott Steiner and Triple H back in 2003, but why arm wrestling? Like, I don't know. It just and then you don't give us a definitive finish. You're not getting one anyway, so why are we even doing this? And Jerry Lawler kind of was the highlight of this whole thing. Quote, Mr. McMahon always has something up his sleeve, even when he's not wearing sleeves. So as predictable as a contract signing ending in conflict, it's just like this. You knew this wasn't going to be a finish that had any sort of result, but we lead to the back. Maria asking Edge if he's the smallest or the strangest. As we said, that's the theme of the night. And Edge says none and explains how he won the World Heavyweight Championship. And that's why he isn't the biggest, the strongest, or anything like that. He's the greatest. So I thought that was pretty cool that he took what was a goofy, shitty, campy line and turned it into a pretty good promo. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, Edge is like A+ tier here.
He might be
he's
the
doing
MVP of this era, where
100%.
Like, I don't know if people really appreciated what he was doing, especially in a very bleak era of WWE.
Yeah, no, I think this is, I was just coming back onto like my fandom, right? Like I was just like kind of out of that 2003, 4 era, and I was like, what am I doing? And then I kind of got brought back with this stuff. And it was a weird time to be brought back, but Edge's heel work here is top of the line. Like he's probably one of the best at this whole time, and it made me appreciate Edge more. It brought my lust for pro wrestling, so I give Edge all the kudos, man.
So we have Edge and Axel next. He's taking on, he's partnering with MVP, taking on Batista and Chris Benoit in a tag team match. And Batista selling an injury coming in. He's taped up in the leg, and this match is joined in progress because they just hop right into the action. MVP's hammering on Benoit in the corner. They are dominating them, and we get some of the great spots here. And watching Benoit in a vacuum, of course, we know that what goes on with Benoit, and you and I have done this before in WCW and ECW, watching his matches. If you can separate the actions from the man and just watch him in action, there's not a lot of guys better to do what he did in the ring. I mean, the dude was an absolute monster, and seeing him interact and go out there and just do his thing with the chops and the suplexes, like he was a wrestling machine, personified, and the rolling German suplexes. But I really enjoyed sort of the end here. There's a hot tag to Batista to pick up the pace, and Edge walks away. So the spine buster into the swan dive finishes MVP. So Edge just kind of leaves MVP out to die. And this was certainly something interesting. Of course, we got to see Edge on commentary at some point where he's just not interacting at all with MVP. Great heel work, and MVP, of course, was getting definitely a pretty major push here. And he reemerges on our screen during the pandemic and becomes one of the highlights as a manager. Your thoughts on this? I mean, this was to me, like WWE wise, even today, a main event level tag match as far as Raw or TV goes. And, it does make sense that Edge would walk out for a match. Like, he is the ultimate opportunist, and he's only going to wrestle when things actually matter to him.
Yeah.
To me, it just makes Edge really appear to be afraid of Batista, and they have a cage match coming up. So there's at least that dynamic. It did a good job of building it up, and, maybe they're going to be building up to a little bit more in the future, but Edge and Batista was certainly the story here.
No, 100%. But I do give MVP credit, man, because he was somebody I was warmed up to at this point, and I really, really enjoyed the gimmick, even though how stupid it was. And that's very uncharacteristic of me as a wrestling fan to really enjoy stupid gimmicks. But this was MVP was great here. I think everybody did a great job. I loved Edge. I thought this was great. It was probably the best thing we've seen on the show. I really enjoyed it.
Well, it only goes downhill from here. Our next two matches are the worst matches we'll ever cover in the history of Shot Nostalgia. Stay with us, guys. We're going to give you our good commentary on it. We lead into first this mixed tag match. We have Finlay and Hornswoggle taking on the Boogeyman and Little Boogeyman. So big and small, WrestleMania 2 energy, of course. And, what else could you expect from a match like this? And the wrestling wasn't really what you're expecting here. Work rate is absent in this match, and this was just entertainment, and I guess that's the point. It's supposed to be about being wacky, and the Boogeyman is wacky at this time, and he's one of the more eccentric characters. And Hornswoggle and Little Boogeyman are doing their best to have the comedy act, and naturally this turns into a chicken fight. I just don't see the appeal of something like this on our screen, and there is times and place where this happens. Little Doink, and there's a lot of the eras of wrestling where the little and big wrestling goes on. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of things like this.
We peaked at WLC. That
yes, never gonna.
You can't top that, and that was actually great. This was a comedy scene. This was featuring Finlay with some pretty stiff ass shots. Besides that, you're getting all the backstage running around. Hornswoggle's climbing ladders and dropping down poles. Like, it's just gimmicky, goofy bullshit that probably does not belong on a Saturday Night's Main Event, but it's super fitting too. At the same time, it's very strange, especially you think 2007, we should be well past this, but here we are.
Like I said, this bleeds into this extreme expose after the fact, and we saw Finlay using the distraction to actually get the pin on Little Boogeyman, and pins Little Boogeyman for at the end of the match, and that's it. And like you said, this is just comedy for the sake of comedy. And I'm like, there's some level of feud with Finley and the Boogeyman. Like I can't find the semblance of the source of it, but I don't know, man. This is goofy as hell. And like,
yeah,
I can see why people will become disenchanted with the product when you have this type of stuff on it. Cause it's just, oh, man, it's just campy for the sake of campy. And it's just, it doesn't hit, especially a guy like Finley. Dude is work rate personified. He's messed up in this thing. I don't even understand it.
No, I don't think he did either. But I mean, I don't know, man. It was a different time. It was an absolute different time. Shame that Fit Finley's later end of the career was wasted on shit like this and not giving him an actual push to do something, because goddamn, the dude was in-ring genius, and I wish we got to see more of that in WWE.
So this leads into this extreme expose, and like you mentioned before, Little Boogeyman and Hornswoggle still chasing each other, and that leads to the normal size Boogeyman and Finley making the save at Shillelagh, and they go back to the extreme expose dancing, and then out comes Hornswoggle again. Like all I could see was Vince just like cracking up in the back, thinking this was hilarious, and it falling upon deaf ears.
God damn, pal!
This is the funniest shit ever. Like it's just not funny.
Slap your knees, everybody! Slap your knees.
And they somehow like extreme expose at the time, for correct me if I'm wrong, was just about having these girls dancing and just having like the lights and the music, and they somehow complicate that to the point where it's not even enjoyable.
It's 100%. I believe that started some
bullshit.
It started with Balls Mahoney and Barbie Blink, I want to say, on ECW. Like that's where it came from. It was like your dancing on top of the building ECW kind of vibe from like when we were actually watching
like a
ECW.
go-go dancer type of stuff.
Yeah, but then they turned it into this. It's just got worse and worse and worse and worse.
Well, because WWE puts their fingerprints on it, they have to overproduce everything. That's what it feels like. That's exactly what we're watching here.
Very, very well.
Ripping the heart and soul out of ECW and pulling it out, putting it in front of them, holding it there for 2 years, and then making them watch them die in front of them.
We're gonna turn them into Nitro Girls, like God damn it, pal.
Keeping them alive just long enough with the bare minimum amount of food to be miserable. That's what ECW was.
Just long enough for Vince to take the title to himself. Let the strippers loose, damn it.
And that's why I think, I don't know who was saying this. Maybe it was Hal Haney on the debate, but like long game, the vindictive nature of WWE at large was like, you may feel like this is a tribute to ECW, but in the long run, it was a hit piece to make people almost forget what they used to do. And of course, over time, people almost forget WWE, ECW, and what it became. They remember fondly what ECW used to be. This is the type of stuff they're like rewriting the narrative to make you remember the goofy shit like this, the Boogeyman and Little Boogeyman stuff, and think that was and Kevin Thorne and all that shit. That's what ECW was at the time.
It's goofy.
And thankfully, it doesn't live in people's lore. Like,
thank God.
Doesn't exist there. Anyway, we spent too much time on this. Let's get to the main event here. It is a 6-man tag match, and man, this is
you forgot star-studded 6-man tag match.
This, you want to talk about a fever dream type of match? It is, guys. Again, I'm not just making these names up. This happened. Tune in and check it out if you want to see it to believe it. It's Kevin Thorne, Viscera, and Umaga taking on the team of Kane, Doink, and Eugene. So this is originally, according to my reports here, it was originally supposed to be Kane, Goldust, Shannon Moore, and Kamala versus Umaga, Viscera, Doink, and Kevin Thorne. Goldust backed out, so this way they pulled out, I believe, Shannon Moore as well, and they just went in the direction and put Doink on the other side. So instead of an 8-man tag, and where do you go with this? Like, Eugene's not even doing like the typical Eugene character. If you're familiar with Eugene's act in like 2004, where he's doing what he's doing, he's a superhero now. Like, so.
Oh man, yeah. There's no politically correct way to talk about it without coming off bad. But the Eugene character is in its own just the worst product of the 2000s eras of WWE. I mean, Jesus Christ! But this is Vince playing like I got some big names I could call. Like, and then the second you hear Goldust pulls out of it, like it's bad, and he probably was like, I don't want my name on any of this shit. Like, this is awful, and it was awful. How is Kane, an elected official, after doing shit like this. Erase. Katie Vick, okay, we understand. This is the worst part of Kane's career.
So, all right, let's go silver lining here. I want to give some love to Umaga, of course, watching him in there, but this is by all accounts just a comedy type of match, and this was, all you could probably hope it would be, like watching something like this. And as far as like watching this in a vacuum of being like, okay, it was exciting as far as like, and waiting for the hot tag for Kane and watching Kane get his shit in was cool. And the original lineup, I guess, would have been better, maybe not. And it's Kane and a bunch of guys versus Umaga and slightly more effective guys. And how good was this ever going to be? Like, why don't we just trim the fat and just have Kane versus Umaga in a one-on-one match if you really want to get to that and build up the monsters?
Yeah.
Doink is cool. Like, I get, and
I popped for Doink.
But yeah, this kind of encapsulates what they were going for. This is the main event, not for time constraint, not for anything else. People aren't sleeping. This is just kind of what the roster was at this time. And I understand ECW was a big part of this, and this was like a large part was the ECW roster getting emphasized here. But like, I don't know if Kamala, Shannon Moore, Goldust, and Kane on one side versus Umaga, Viscera, Doink, and Thorne would have been better, but I don't know if it could have been worse, right?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. Fuck around and find out, right? Crazy.
So the NC is Kane hitting a top rope clothesline on Kevin Thorne. Umaga makes the save. Viscera misses a charge at Kane in the corner. He gets chokeslammed for the pin. Kane winds up picking up the victory for his team. 9 minutes and 8 seconds of what the hell did I just watch? And that was it, man. So they managed to kind of, exhaust you in an hour and a half, and it just didn't, even with with no commercials, it felt like, man, I can't wait for this to end. And I don't know, I haven't found myself saying that about many episodes of any episode of Shot in Nostalgia we've done. I go back to Smoky Mountain, where it was very limited production wise. This was, I'm sure as an NBC executive, you can't be happy from what you're watching. And it would have been nice to see like a little bit more effort on their booking side. This was something that, felt like a waste of time. I hate to say that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Like, it was just, it was so all over the place. The main event felt like you took too much NyQuil, and you're like, oh, Doink the Clown's on TV with Umaga and Eugene. Like, it's fucking so goofy, man. It's so all over the place. Like, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know where they were going with it. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, especially looking at of course, we've covered every episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, and maybe we're a little bit biased now because we watched it in the immediate, but seeing how big this stage used to be, it's almost like making a mockery out of it. And it's not like these guys wouldn't deserve a place on the card. It's the way the match was constructed, especially where they were trying to make it look like they were a bunch of goons. And that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to make it feel lesser than, because I guess the idea was to make Umaga and Kane on the opposite sides of the ring feel like they're big deals, but kind of backfired to me watching this, this velocity style match just kind of in front of our eyes unfold on Saturday Night's Main Event, which used to be a very important, pivotal. It's not WrestleMania, but it shouldn't be treated like this.
No, this is a sad sight to paint Saturday Night's Main Event's logo on something. So it's a shame, absolute shame.
Well, let's get to the chaser. We'll pick our favorite part of these two episodes, and we'll talk about them. Let's get the chaser.
The Chaser.
All right, Belcaster. So I know this is like skewed very negative in our ways, but I'm sure we can find the silver line. You and I are positive guys. Let's start with you. Your favorite match or segment from these two episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event.
Now I could just if you were watching it with the mindset of Vince just laughing and slapping his knee during the Hornswoggle and little boogeyman shit, I think that would have been the leader. We should have had Vince on commentary for that match because I think that would have been great. But honestly, I'm giving it my work rate match if you can find one. The Batista, Rey Mysterio, Bobby Lashley tag match against Mark Henry, Finlay, and King Booker. I mean, that is the best pickings you can get off of this porn. But I mean, there was the John Cena stuff with Edge. I mean, repetitive, yes. Have you seen it a million times? But was it bad? No, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. but yeah, I mean, I little highlights is definitely Sabu on NBC. That gets 100% my vote on that bad boy. But I mean, seeing Doink was cool. It's all right.
So, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. There's definitely some great stuff on here, and I don't know, maybe it's just in comparison to what we've watched on this season.
Randy Orton and Hogan.
100%. I was going to say the Randy Orton versus Hogan spot with the RKO, but I'm also going to go match-wise. I'm going to say John Cena and Edge. Even though it's a DQ finish, maybe comparing to a year later on Saturday Night's Main Event on NBC, what they put on, almost like trying to not get renewed by NBC. Like, we don't want to make another one of these. Let's put out the worst possible card we can. But it's also a commentary where they were. It's a transitional time, and time and place. Maybe people enjoyed the goofy characters, and maybe it doesn't have the same nostalgic tendencies that maybe the older stuff does. And I don't know. It's maybe time will be more kind to this if we advance 15 years in the future and give it some time. I don't think so, but maybe it will. I do. Like you said, I think the John Cena Edge feud is so classic. But the build up to Randy Orton and Hulk Hogan at SummerSlam, to me in that first episode, probably was the highlight and most memorable. People remember that moment with him RKOing him and all that stuff. But largely uneventful stuff here. Like, it really was. Like, you could skip both these episodes and still be the same level of informed wrestling fan, even at that time watching in real time. There was nothing you missed. So we had you covered from pillar to post, and we endured all the blows watching them for you. So that's pretty much those two Saturday Night's Main Events in a nutshell. And looking at the way we structured these episodes, maybe we should have just ended in 1992. Like, I'm just like, maybe we took the DeLorean too far into the future.
We gotta go back, Marty.
We gotta go back for sure. But let's close the tab and talk about where we're going next week. Continuing this drive through Shot Nostalgia, episode 18 of season 5, which is the finale. Let's close the tab.
Closing the tab.
All right, the lights are coming on here at the bar as we close the tab. Next week's episode is episode 18 of season 5, airing on December 22nd, 2023. It's the season finale of our season covering Saturday Night's Main Event. We're covering season number 35, Saturday Night's Main Event number 35 on August 13th, 2007 in New York City, New York, in Madison Square Garden. Main event by Batista and Kane versus Finlay and the Great Khali. And also finishing it up with main event number 36, July 28th, 2007 at the Verizon Center in Washington, D.C. Main evented by John Bradshaw, Layfield, Kane, Ted DiBiase, and Cody Rhodes versus John Cena, Batista, and Crime Time. So, great stuff. We're also going to talk about CM Punk on commentary. He's going to really crop up in the newsletter. He's being featured very heavily, and I can't wait to talk about that with you next week because it's going to be a great conversation. But as we lead out, man, we're getting ready to the end here. 30-week hiatus here. We're going to be posting our WCW 1996 audio drops. You're not going to miss any sort of sequential order. You're going to get content from us, especially if you're an audio-only listener, unlocking the 1996 WCW Season 1. But Belcaster, we're going to be saying goodbye to Saturday Night's Main Event. What is your feeling on that?
I wish it was going to end in better spirits. I really do. But I mean, so WWE typical fashion that we'd be like, we had a great run here, and this has been one of my favorite seasons I think we've done. But man, I don't know, man, if these next episode's going to has to prove a lot for me, man. But I'm still enjoying the shit show that it is because it's WWE. We, of course, you have your shit shows, especially in this era, this generation, this 2007s, 2008. You're in a very weird period for WWE. So strap me in, man. I'm always here for the ride, and I'm ready to rock it out. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. The beatings from WWE will continue until morale improves. So we're either going to smile and bear it and enjoy the next two episodes. But at the very least, you can expect to be a good conversation. The newsletter definitely has a lot to talk about. As I said, with CM Punk moving into the PG era, we're also going to be discussing all the fallout from the Chris Benoit tragedy, especially with the company and how close they were to being put out of business. I mean, people forget it almost destroyed wrestling at large from within. It was a huge pivotal moment that the company somehow recovered from. But as we said, 30 episodes of WCW 1996 will be dropping starting, on the 30th of December. And it's going to be starting the new year straight through. And we're going to be working on the NXT season. Mike and also Matt from Extra Cool are going to be on there talking about all the takeovers. So we'll be returning to live programming starting in July. But like I said, you're going to be getting all the content as you usually expect here on Saturday. And of course, you're still going to get our voices. Mike will be on Fig Night. I'll be on Wrestling Tonight. I'll be on Brace for Impact. Who knows where else you're going to find us, but this has been a great time.
Brace for Impact.
This has been skewed negative, of course, Belcaster, but like you said, this is a blast to do this with you, and I always have a great time talking nostalgic wrestling, good, bad, or amazing. Who knows?
Yeah, we go through the shitstorm together, man, and that's the important part. And regardless of the outcome, I still had a great goddamn time, and I know you did too. So that's the takeaway from it. Wrestling is like that sometimes, right? You take the good with the bad, and when it's bad, you got to just sit back and enjoy the shit show. And man, what a shit show this is.
Makes me appreciate where we are in 2023 going into 2024, especially there was such a dark period of wrestling. And I remember this fondly, or not so fondly, I should say, from 2007 to probably 2014 was that real period. I was busier with my life and things were going to college and stuff, but oof, these were some bad times. And I think we're walking through and we're seeing the worst side of it because it's not Raw, SmackDown, the pay-per-views. I'm sure there were bright spots, of course. We're almost seeing the real wart-covered area of it. But you know what? We're here for it. We're going to cover it to you. We promised to it, and we're going to give you all the episodes we promised. That's how much we love you guys. But Belcaster, lead us out. It's not Jesse Ventura. It's not Vince.
It's not Jesse.
Who is it? I don't even know.
I don't know. Maybe I got to start working on my JBL or so. I don't know. I don't got a good JB. Maggle. No, I don't know. Who are? God damn. We're just gonna have Vince do commentary of little boogeyman. You run. You Hornswoggle. You fall down that pole. Guys, cut the commercial. Damn it.